Okay, Sashi.
Yes, hi there, guys. Welcome to the Bhagavad Gita ongoing series on this. Um, so I understand that many of you guys are new to this session, and we have been doing this for almost a year now. So Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters. I feel like with ninth and 10th chapter, we're kind of at the peak of it. So at this point, um, when we are going into chapter 11, 12, and further on, it's almost a commitment, commitment not to become a Hindu. There's no conversion whatsoever. But I think if you don't have the foundation from 1 till 9, it kind of would seem like you're lost. Um, and a lot of it will seem just like a whole bunch of mumbo jumbo. Um, it's unfortunate, and I think there are like 9 or 10 videos on YouTube, and Jason will post that link on our chat thread here. So I would highly recommend that you take that playlist and spend some time on it. Next time you guys come to the lecture series, or not lecture series, but discussion series. Um, Today really was meant for somebody who has been with us for some time, and but because all of you guys are new, um, I might have to kind of just go through the summary and a summary of the first 10 chapters, sort of, very quickly. And we get into the uh, it was almost kind of like an exercise portion, where we were supposed to do an activity. It was a minor activity, small activity, but you don't, I mean, we can just do it ad hoc here as well. So the the book that we are referring to, there are two books. One is by Aurobindo Ghosh, just Bhagavad Gita. That link, I think, was there in today's meeting invite. But those are just line by line translation of the 700 plus verses in the 18 chapters, right? It doesn't have a lot of explanation. There is another book that I had put the link for in the first session of this series, was Mahatma Gandhi's um, Bhagavad Gita translation. So which went through, like, he wrote, the first version he wrote was in Gujarati, one of the Indian languages, and then that was translated by one of his followers to English. And that actually has some explanations. There are many books, one of the persons who usually joins our session here mentioned Ishvaran, I think, and I have come across many, yeah, Bhagavad Gita by Eknath Ishvaran. That is also good. Um, and there is also something that I came across um, while I was reading. What was I reading? Um, it's called as actually uh, River of Compassion. It's a Christian priest or mystic, I don't know, Barry Griffiths, who wrote that book, River of Compassion. It's a verse by verse translation, and he kind of brings about the Hindu thought process and also Christian thought process, right, in the summary section of it, right? So I thought it was kind of interesting. Um, so let me share my screen here. Um, so Wendy is waiting in the room, I guess. Um, okay. Um, so one of the eternal questions about God is, like, Hindus have 33 million gods, right? Uh, and counting still. Um, so this chapter 10 is really all about, so this 33 million number really is just, there are so many different poetic metaphors around that 33 million, right? Basically everything is God, right? um So so this is what Bede Griffiths in his book River of Compassion, which is a line-by-line translation of Gita. He says the question of pantheism arises here. Pantheism identifies. So this comes in chapter 11 of the translation. So as we go into chapter 11, I think people who are coming to this series, I would say now it would be nice if you can stick around up till chapter 18. It's okay if you don't want to, totally understandable. It's not for everybody. And I would recommend that you go through the first YouTube, all the series to get the understanding of the first, whatever, 9, 10 chapters. And then we will talk about chapter 11, because chapter 11 by far, I kind of think like it talks about certain things which can be very difficult to understand, because it means a variety of things. And if you've ever looked at God from Hindu perspective, it has like 4 or 5 hands and 15 faces and all of that stuff, right? So chapter 11 kind of goes into that. But there is, again, this whole Gita is actually a song. It's a poetry. So that poetic metaphor, I feel like most Hindus have taken it, or most people try to take it very literally, and that's a problem. It doesn't really help in our spiritual journey at all. So it's a chapter 11 by far will be the most difficult chapter, which will require for you to kind of go through the first 10 chapters properly, at least watch the video series, and come to 11 with quite an open mind to understand what that symbology is going to be in chapter 11. But we are going to talk about chapter 10 a little bit. Fred?
In the introduction to chapter 11 in the Eswaran book that I has, it starts off by saying chapter 11 is the most exalted chapter of the entire Gita. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. So yes, it is. It is going to be exalted. It could come across as very dogmatic. It could come across as, oh God, here we go again about Hinduism type of thing. It can come across as many things. So I have a certain take of that. And today I will give a little bit of a preview. So when you read chapter 11, you should have a slightly different understanding, which I think in our series here, God has a different understanding, right? So we are not talking about the God that we are familiar, or at least, commonly familiar in our colloquial sense. So let's start today's session with a couple different things. Chapter 10 focuses on Vibhuti. Vibhuti basically means something that is awe-inspiring. So to give the background of the how we got here up to chapter 10, there are 4 characters in this book, or in this particular poetry, Gita. Gita happens to be almost kind of like the Bible of Hinduism. And it sits right in the middle of a very large epic, almost much larger than Odyssey or any of the Greek mythologies, which is called as Mahabharata, which in itself has quite a bit of symbolic, understanding. They say that any human interaction that you can think of on this planet, there is some equivalent in that Mahabharata somewhere. Some character has already reviewed and discussed that there. So I don't know about that, but that's what they say. The point being that it is vast. Like it has about 100,000 verses or something, and these 700 verses come in a particular section, almost kind of like a climax of the whole epic, where what has happened is, in the story, there are these it's a whole family of a royal family, and 2 brothers. One of them is blind, and the other is sort of he becomes the king. The blind is the older son who should have been the king, but because he's blind, he does not become the king. He's the Dhritarashtra. And the other is Pandu, and he becomes the king because he is able-bodied, healthy, and all of that stuff. Pandu has 2 wives, 5 kids. One of the kids is Arjuna. Dhritarashtra, who kind of harbors a jealousy against Pandu because he got the kingdom from him, basically. So he's not very happy. He's not very happy that he's blind. And all of that stuff, right? So, and the interesting story there as well. But briefly, Dhritarashtra is not happy with his situation. His older son is Duryodhana, and Duryodhana is completely able-bodied, and now he basically says that since I'm the elder son of Dhritarashtra, I should get the kingdom from Pandu. So they plot a variety of things. Pandu is killed, and Dhritarashtra becomes sort of a nominal king at that point.
Excuse me, but Pandu is not killed.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, but he gets sick. Yeah. Um, so somehow, basically the point, I mean, I don't want to go through the detail of Mahabharata, but Dhritarashtra sort of becomes a king, and Duryodhana wants to be the king as well, right? And then the Pandavas, the 5 kids and their mom and everybody, they're sent to exile, blah blah blah. There's like lots and lots of things happen, crazy things happen. The amount of atrocities these Kauravas, the Duryodhana's brothers, 100 kids is what the Dhritarashtra, the blind king, has. Those 100 kids do lots of atrocities on Arjuna and his brothers, the Pandavas. They're exiled a couple times, and they are hurt many times. Blah blah blah. So there comes a point where something really horrible happens to their wife, Draupadi. Interesting story in itself, with a lot of symbology. So what happens is that it comes to a point where uh, the 5 brothers decide that this is it, we have to um, win this land, this kingdom back to us. And Duryodhana is also itching for a fight. So this is the crescendo of the whole thing, the Mahabharata Yuddha, or the battlefield that is about to start. All right. And what happens is Arjuna is sort of like their leading warrior, if you will. He is basically leading the Pandava armies. And Kaurava side is being led by Duryodhana. And now notice that these are all basically brothers, right? Cousin brothers, they're fighting with each other. On both the sides, it's families and friends that have taken sides between these two people, which is now troubling Arjuna. Arjuna basically says, look, I can see my grandpa, my teacher out there on the other side, and I don't think I want to fight. And fighting is only going to cause all kinds of harm. Our clan is going to get destroyed. Our women are going to suffer. They're going to become widows, and their kids and generations are going to be destroyed. So this was considered as a very horrible war at that point, right? So Krishna is a friend of Arjuna, also kind of related through his mom. But what happens is that Krishna somehow ends up, it's an interesting story in itself, and you can look at the YouTube videos to understand how Krishna ends up becoming the charioteer. So he is controlling the chariot for Arjuna. And one of the things Krishna himself decides is that I'm not going to fight in this war, but his army goes to the Kaurava side, and he has like, I don't know, like 100,000 soldiers or whatnot. And he gives it to Kauravas, and it's an interesting story there also. Arjuna chooses Krishna alone, and so Krishna is driving the chariot for him. And Arjuna basically at the beginning of the first chapter says that, hey, Krishna, I can hear all the conch shells being played and all of that stuff happening. I want to just take a sight of the battlefield. So can you draw this chariot a little bit to the center of the battlefield? And that's where I think Krishna kind of does an interesting thing. He almost purposefully takes Arjuna in front of a location where he can actually see his loved ones on the other side, which is Bhishma, the grandpa, and Duryodhana.
Drona.
The teacher. What is his name? I'm
Drona.
forgetting. Dronacharya. So thank you. Um, so so they so he starts he's like immediately in despair. Like, hey, Krishna, I don't think I can kill these guys, right? And that's where the Gita starts. He is completely in despair, and this is sort of Arjuna's very important existential crisis, if you will, because it is not that he has never killed in his life. He has fought many wars, and he was a very, very achieved warrior in the area. So it was not like he has not killed people. But here comes the existential crisis where, now the fight is with his own family, his own loved ones. Now, had Krishna taken him in front of Duryodhana, who he actually hates, I don't think this Gita would have happened. So Krishna bringing him there is also kind of a symbolism to existential crises that we all go through. It's a test for our human growth, basically, at that point. So it's as if, again, when I say God, don't think of some God in the sky or any of the gods that we kind of understand, right? Just it's as if universe brings about that crisis in front of us, so that we rise above ourselves, rise above these little mundane things. Oh no, this is my loved one and I hate this thing, which is what happens to us literally every day, isn't it? We make our choices based on what we like and what we dislike, period. We can, it's very rarely do we try to rise above those two feelings. And so Krishna basically tells him through a second chapter that, look, while you have such really high good feelings about this very sanctimonious things going on in your head, but let me tell you a little bit about um, what is the right thing to do, and you think you know the right thing, but that right thing that is coming out of your mouth could potentially just be something that is conditioned by the society. That you should not fight your brother, you should not fight your grandpa, but look, series of events have happened. You've been here now, you're a warrior. For you to run away from this battle, it's going to be just really bad for you personally. And even if you become a recluse, you being a warrior, you're not going to be quiet because you are born to be a warrior, right? So that becomes the sort of the dharma, right? Dharma basically, there's so many meanings. Dharma, a loose meaning could be religion, but really it can also mean what I'm called upon to do at a given moment. And that calling upon really depends on your skill sets or what you've been doing, all kinds of things, right? So running away from what you've been called upon to do is irreligious or adharma. So again, I'm not going to go through the detail. The second chapter itself is quite revealing of the entire Bhagavad Gita, in my opinion. It covers all the nuances of the philosophy in very succinctly. But obviously, Arjuna does not understand. And, we are very much like Arjuna, right? So the most interesting thing here, again, I think I covered this last session, was so Arjuna is talking to Krishna. So that is a face-to-face conversation. What happens is that Dhritarashtra, being blind, he is away from the war field, right? From the battlefield. And he's curious what is going on in the war. And so he talks to his charioteer. His name is Sanjaya. And Sanjaya is the narrator for this whole Gita. And it's as if Sanjaya has the powers to see what's going on in the battlefield, right? So he has this almost kind of like a vision, and he is explaining that to a blind person. So to a blind person, how do you take the life's events that you can see, and how do you narrate to a blind person? Becomes yet another filtering of the data, right? So there is something happening where Krishna is telling his knowledge. Arjuna is listening to him and seeing him right in front of him, and Krishna happens to be his friend. So this is an eye-to-eye, ear-to-ear, mind-to-mind meeting, sort of. Sanjaya is having this vision about it. That has its own ton of symbology. And then he's explaining that to, so there's first filter happening as the data comes out of Krishna's mouth, and Arjuna is listening. Because when we are listening to something, we're also sort of filtering that data, right? Because we are bringing our experience into the data that is coming to you. So Arjuna is mostly trying to understand what Krishna is saying from the societal norms point of view that he has come to believe in, like social conditioning. And, we also do the same thing, when this data is coming to us, for us to change our mindset into thinking in terms of what Krishna is saying, we are far removed from it. Arjuna was right in front of him. Sanjay was narrating something. The blind person is sitting there. Some of the visual parts of this are poetically exaggerated so that the effect kind of reaches to the Dhritarashtra. And notice now the journey. So there is the spatial separation between these characters. And now there's a temporal separation, right? So we are so many years removed, centuries removed from this event. And we are sort of listening. So we happen to be almost kind of like Dhritarashtra, right? So we are listening to this. We don't have the vision. We are sort of blind. And we are trying to understand the metaphors that are coming through from Krishna. So anyways, so the chapter 3, 4, 5, and 6, I would say, kind of go through a so-called karma yoga. And karma yoga basically talks about I'm doing my things. While I'm doing my things, where is that doing coming from? Is it coming as a reaction to what I'm seeing out there? Is it coming from, I like this, so I'm going to do this, and this is going to win me more awards, right? Accolades, all of that stuff. Or I hate this, so I'm going to be out of anger, out of fear. So that is this exterior sense-based actions that are happening. So that is the regular karma, sort of, right? Our action, our day-to-day action, which Krishna basically, and that's my interpretation, is he says, most of the time it's just reaction. We are not really doing a pure action which comes from deep within. So we are not doing that. So he gives a remedy saying that karma yoga basically means that when you are doing an action, consider that action is not something for yourself, but it is, you dedicate it to me. So there's a lot of me and I in this whole book, right? So this me and I, one would think, oh my God, Krishna is just very pompous, he's talking about himself and he wants to be the God. No, this me and I is the universal I, or universal me, if you will, right? So I've also said that in a couple sessions before. It becomes an interesting read when you look at this whole Gita and read it, obviously from Arjuna's perspective, because some of his questions are our questions, but also read it from the perspective of Krishna. When he says, I feel that I, right? Ultimately, it is the manifestation of Krishna through our actions, or Krishna or consciousness or God or whatnot, right? So when the Aurobindo Ghosh's book specifically does this, and also the original Gita does this, whenever Krishna is speaking, they don't call him Krishna. They call him Bhagwan, meaning there's some deeper being that is speaking through this thing. And we have that too, right? All of us have that, right? So ultimately, that's the place that he brings him through this journey. So karma yoga. Again, I would say go back to the video lectures, and then 7, 8, and 9 sort of again go into this exploration of what is a yoga, what is yogi, who is the right person, who is penance a thing? Why do penance? What is reclusion? What is giving up? And all of that basically comes to a point where Krishna, what he's trying to say is that, look, running away from the society, running away from your duties is not the way. But you can be here working, be with your family, be with everybody, do your actions as if they are karma yoga, and you can still have the mindset of a recluse, mindset of a sannyasi, or you can practice being yogi while you are in samsara, meaning this world. So now, slowly through this question answer session, what happens is you see a transformation of these questions that Arjuna is asking from chapter to chapter. If you look at, initially he comes across a little bit like, oh, I know it better and you're just a charioteer, right? That kind of an attitude. And then it slowly, obviously he's a friend, so he asks certain things. Look, I think you're wrong, blah blah blah, right? Like, what do you mean by this, right? So he's asking these questions. And he slowly realizes that he's speaking with not only his friend but somebody deeper, and he starts making sense of this stuff. And he comes to, like, about chapter 10. What happens is Krishna basically has told him that, look, everything is a manifestation of me. And we talked about Prakriti and Purusha, right? So Purusha is the inner core of everything, if you will. And I have some diagrams that are coming up. But Prakriti is anything, like your mind, intellect, your senses, body, world, objects, everything from there on, right? Because you are observing it. You're observing your thoughts. You're observing your words. You're observing things out there through your senses. And everything, you as an aware being are observing all of this stuff. So now he doesn't say that as you, but he says I, and he talks about, like, everything that you see is manifestation of me. So that is through, like, about verse 16 or what, I forget where it is, but so there Arjuna basically asks him, hey, I can't get enough of these glories that you talk about. Can you explain to me where can I find so-called God? And that's where the Vibhuti conversation kind of goes into, right? So he starts talking about, so he says that we kind of expounded on this line last time. Arjuna says that only you know yourself. So this can have so many interesting meanings, like because Krishna is sort of like the reached person. Um, so, but it is true for us too, right? I mean, what I know, what I'm telling you guys, these are coming across as words in my mouth, but the real thing is still within me. I'm trying my best to explain it in the words, but the real thing is still within me. And it is, some of it might still be very inexpressible. And then you guys are listening to it, and then you're making your own interpretations. And if I was to ask you to explain this back to me, and let's say you explain it today, and then you go do some more research and some more reading, and then you do another explanation. And let's say we take 4 samples of that explanation. You will literally see like a different variation of that understanding. Are those 4 different selves, 4 different people of you? Maybe, because you have changed over time, right? So ultimately, you are observing your own reaction, and when you're telling it, words are further limiting your deeper understanding. So he's saying to Krishna that only you can know yourself well. So can you tell me thy vibhutis? Vibhuti, basically, my understanding is anything that is awe-inspiring. So he asks him, tell me more about all your glories, right? So that's the other word that we can replace for Vibhuti. So it is pervading through these worlds. How shall I know thee, right? And then here, in all of these from 20 onwards, there are some interesting uh, things that they talk about, like Aditya's Vishnu, the sun, Shiva. All of this is really interesting, but they are interesting for a Hindu mindset, right? So somebody who has grown in Hindu culture and Hindu background, there is a deeper understanding of, what is he talking about here? Is it relevant? Yes, it is relevant, but I don't think it is going to help us because, we all come from various different backgrounds. So what I decided to do for these things here through 40, 20 through 40 is that obviously you guys can explore what he means by Nagas or Varuna, and all of this stuff. There are tons of details available on online. There was one interesting site that I found, which is called as this one. So this is like a whole Bhagavad Gita, and it has commentaries from so many people. You're welcome to review them. Each has a different take. It will just take forever. But what I would recommend is that, let's just talk about this in a sense that sort of will make us understand awe-inspiring things, or at least, so this becomes sort of like the first step towards that so-called oneness that we have been talking about in all of our, Vedanta series prior to Bhagavad Gita, because ultimately we want to come to that sense of Advaita. So let's jump into this. And then I'll open this up, right? So give me like a few more minutes. So before we talk about glories, right? I thought maybe we can talk about good, bad, what do we think as bad, right? So first of all, I think there are these 3 parameters around us, if you will. So there is something that is aware within us, right? I know that I'm talking. And then I know that I'm thinking. So there is some thoughts happening. My mouth is moving, voice is coming out. I can see the laptop. I can see you guys, right? So these are the senses and objects. That is one perimeter. And the mind and intellect is the perimeter within me, right? And there is this I, the aware self. So if you will, these can be broken down like this, right? Paramatman is this aware consciousness self. Now, initially, because we think I'm separate than you, so it kind of is that jivatma, right? So just a very limited being. You say, I'm just Shashi, and you might be Lisa, or you might be Jason, right? So we all think that we are independent beings, but ultimately the goal is to come to this state which is called as Paramatma. Paramatma is where we all, you understand that the consciousness within you and the consciousness within me is exactly the same. The consciousness within me and this existence of this laptop or this table or even inanimate objects, trees, plants, mountains, whatnot, right? So you understand that there is a connection, right? That is the state that we want to be. So the deeper is the self, there is the mind, intellect, and then there is the sense, body, and object. So karma, as we talked, actions that react at the body level mind. So something happens to you out there, you look at something and you say, okay, I have only 3 bedrooms in my house and I want to have 1 extra bedroom, right? Because I don't know, my friend has 4-bedroom house or whatnot, right? So it's sort of a reaction. So you say, okay, some action comes out of it. And now you're going to earn a little more money, do whatever activities you require to do, earn that money, and then you're going to build that extra house or get that extra car or whatnot, right? So that is that reaction at a body level. And it can also be a reaction to mind level, right? Because you are angry about something, or you are feeling lacking, or you love something, and you out of that, an action comes out, right? And that is the karma. Karma yoga, actions dedicated to some higher purpose. Now, um, it can be easy for people who totally believe in God. And if it is a Hindu, it becomes easier to say, hey, you know what? I'm doing this for Krishna, right? If he's a devout person. I happen to not be that, right? So, so it becomes really hard for me to digest that part. But what this gives me is a sort of a guidance on how to look at my action and immediately question my motives, right? When I look at my motives, um, I can start seeing some layering of, why is this action, why am I getting into this state of anger or anguish or, want or greed or whatnot, right? So it immediately splits me into 2. One who wants to do it and one who is observing, who is wanting to do it. And that observing itself will kind of tame this need for whatever action that is going to come out of. Now, you might still take the action, but now it comes from a deeper understanding, right? And that is where Krishna, in the initial few chapters, he'll say, follow karma yoga. And he says, easiest is to dedicate the action to me. Now, this me is that inner me, which is the self-aware me. You can say, okay, you can say blindly, I'm going to dedicate this to God. And hey, God is making me do this, and I'm going to do this for God. Now, a couple of things happen there by that approach is that because you're dedicating it to God, you might end up not doing something harmful, right? So that's a good thing. But separating yourself like this, who is the observer and one who is doing the action, that has a much more powerful impact where you can observe your own emotions, right? And my interpretation of this karma yoga is like this, where when Krishna says, dedicate the action to me, he's meaning that watch if the action is coming from your mind and just take a step back and think about what you're doing, right? And then let it come not as a reaction, but a pure action is what he calls it. And then the third level is the jnana, where now, once you have reached a state where you completely understand that you're one with everybody, now, stealing or fighting and everything, all these negative ethical dilemmas that we have in our mind, or some people who behave unethically, or, we might we might think we are behaving ethically. So we are following the good laws that the government or anybody has put in place, yet there might be sinister things that are happening under the layers, right? Those things will not happen. When the jnana or the wisdom, or you have reached to a point where, Krishna is or Buddha is or whatnot, those actions are called as actionless action, meaning that there is no karma attached to it. So there is no sin attached to it, right? So when you do it, you are not there. So the doer is not there, right? So you are not taking the responsibility. And this is what Krishna has been kind of trying to tell Arjuna, that look, you are just a device. There is a plan. There is a larger thing that is happening here that is beyond your control. You think you can control this war. Even if you go to the mountains, people are going to fight among themselves. They're going to kill each other. So nothing is going to stop. If you go away, it is going to cause more harm to the society. And so sometimes when these ethical choices come to us, trying to go through this karma yoga and then jnana, it becomes quite important. And whatever action you take after all of this understanding, let's say Arjuna decides still, look, I think I'm done here. I'm not going to fight this war. I don't care if people kill each other. I just don't want this. That's a pure action, right? Or he says, no, I think I'm going to fight because that's my call of duty at this point. That again becomes a pure action, right? So now this is coming from deep within, like your aware self. So sin is always coming out of ignorance. So this is a much deeper definition of sort of bad action, if you will, right? So from this point of view, if you think about it, literally everything that we do, everything, as ethical as it might seem to our civilized society, from Gita's perspective, it is a sin because we are doing it very unconsciously. So there are lots of these different anecdotes and stories that come about when you read Buddha or even Chinese philosophy and things like that, where they will literally step back and say, look, I think I did this unconsciously. So this is wrong. Samurai warrior, there are stories about that, right? So sin is every act, any act that comes out of ignorance, of not understanding. If you're doing something good because you think society is going to give you an accolade and stuff like that, and because it is written in the law books that this is a good thing to do, even charity, if you do it unconsciously without understanding the repercussions, or you are going to be it will leave a sin. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that when you take the action, you have taken that action mostly from a greed for accolades or whatnot, right? Maybe you want to achieve something, maybe you want to get something, or maybe you want to hurt the other person. Now,
So is it possible for other people to speak a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Why don't you go speak? Yeah.
Is it possible for other people to speak?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So let me say something. Right.
Yeah.
In the first place, I want to point to something interesting, that in the word in the piece that you showed, there is in verse 19. Can we see 19?
Oh yeah. Let me pop it up 1 second. 19.
Right. Yeah, just there. Right. If you look at 19, then he says, the Blessed Lord says, yes, I will tell thee of my divine vibhutis, but only in some of my principal preeminences. And then he says, O best of the Kurus, and so on and so forth, right? Now, we think of the groups as divided, the Pandavas on the one side and the Kauravas on the other side, and Arjuna was a Pandu, was a Pandava. So how is he addressed as best of Kurus? Wait, let me speak. Kaurava means descendants of Kaurava, Kuru, and in fact, both the Pandavas and the Kauravas were descendants of Kuru.
Correct.
So in fact, they're all Kauravas, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is the point that many people miss, but I think it's worth keeping in mind that in fact Arjuna was technically also a Kaurava, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
But-
yeah.
Pardon me?
Kuru,
You-
Kuru is their clan, the name of
Yeah.
that clan.
Exactly. Right.
Again, I think the history and the time and
Yeah.
all of that
But may I
stuff.
speak? I think I have the floor.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So I wanted to say that the thing begins with, what is the first chapter is called Arjuna Vishada Yoga, right? Where Arjun is very, very sad at seeing that he's going to be in this battle where he'll be killing friends and relatives and so on, so forth, right? And then Krishna speaks to him, right? But at the very beginning of the Gita, Krishna says to him, he says, Vasanti Jirnani Yatha Vihaya, Navani Guranti Naroparani, right? Tatha Sharyani Vihaya Jirnani, Anyani Samyanti Navani Dehi, right? This is in fact something that's also found in Plato, because Plato also endorses this notion of the soul, that the body dies and the soul is reborn, right? And therefore, one point, of course, is that Arjuna thinks he may be killing people, but in fact, nobody is being killed because the soul is eternal, right? The other part about doing your deed for the sake of Krishna or for the sake of God, right? This I think is very, very interesting, because I think it's very deep, because it says that there is some way in which we tie ourselves to the future, right? We are pulled by the future and we want the future, and Krishna says, no, stay in the present and do the thing that you have to do, right? Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, no, thank you. So I think I'm trying to get to mostly the chapter 10, and a lot of the summary that I tried to give, it's very much in depth in the first, the series of YouTube videos. Unfortunately, it takes a really long time to get to this place, and I'm trying to give as much as possible. So thank you for filling in, Rohit. Okay, so sin is something that comes out of the mind or our body needs, right? Immediately. And then, a lot of the times, like Rohit was saying, these things, when we are doing these things just from these two parameters, we're always thinking about past and future, right? We're never living in the present. So what happens is these things, something happened in the past, so you're angry or you like it, so you want to repeat doing that because it is going to help you in future. So you either live in past or you're either living in future. So the when you let things come from deeper within, or this karma yoga, like Rohit was saying, is right, you suddenly start living in the now, right? The past is let go, the future you don't worry about, which is what Krishna is also trying to tell to Arjuna. So a lot of these things come to the same understanding eventually, right? And virtue is something that comes from deeper, right? All right. So remember, right? Self, mind, intellect, so-called heart as well, right? Not our actual physical heart, but when we say, this is coming from my heart, right? That a lot of these sort of subtle, or not subtle, but non-tangible things within us. And then there is the senses, body, objects, world, right? So these are the three parameters. And let's move on to the next one here. So here, what I want to talk about is just quickly. So we defined what the bad things are. Now, this is my take on God and religion. As I said, I'm not a very devout person, but I am very spiritual. So I understand these things more from that point of view. And I'm assuming most of us are. So what we can say here is that when we open our eyes, when we listen to things, there are forms out there. But when we close our eyes, everything becomes words and thoughts, right? We even think in English. We think in, I speak Hindi, so I think in Hindi sometimes, right? So these languages and words become our inner state as well, which if you look at it, right, the words and the thoughts can only do so much justice. That you cannot express the whole. There are times which even our thoughts will. That's why they say in a lot of these Zen and everywhere in our Hinduism as well, is to curb these thoughts, control these thoughts. Let not the language limit how you're going to express something or say something. That's why they also say this whole series of yoga, balance of your body, balance of your mind, controlling the thoughts, is an exercise to continuously control the mind fluttering about different things. So one of the metaphor that I brought about a few lectures ago was this notion of a lake. In Hindi, you would call it as Manas Sarovar, a lake which is completely still. In that still lake, you can see the reflection of the trees properly. There's no waves. But our mind, it's not just waves, sometimes there's tsunami going on, right? So the mind has to be calmed down. And a lot of these yoga practices are take us away from forms, not by like closing our eyes. That's not the point. The point is, let not the forms make you do things based on the form, right? So don't get biased by the forms, which means don't get biased by the colors of people's skin or it's a kid or an older person. None of that matters, right? Sex doesn't matter, right? So there is a conscious human being in front of you, or a dog or an animal or plant or whatnot, right? So all of that. Similarly, when you're thinking about something, that thinking process, are you continuously ruminating about something? When most of the time what happens is when we are not working directly with another human being, and when we are left to ourselves, our thought process, if you really pay attention to it, they always lead us to a ditch. We always make up a scenario that is utterly negative. And that has not even happened yet. But we say, aha, that might happen. So let me protect myself. And that protection really all is, ultimately, it's a fear of death. If you think about it, deeper, it's you're protecting yourself, you're protecting your child, you're protecting your house, all of that stuff, right? So, so the whole controlling the thoughts is so that you don't go into this ditch constantly, because assuming that the world is bad is only going to make you do bad things. You can react, you can take the action against a bad thing that is happening to you, for that, at that moment, immediately take the action. That's okay. But to kind of anticipate a bad action that is going to come to your way in a week from now, and then preparing for it and get defensive the whole time, is going to be a disaster, right? So curbing that stuff, right? So remember, in our mind, there are words and thoughts, and then there are the forms, right? So now what has happened to this notion of God and religion? God and religion, in my opinion, has become merely words that we should be afraid of. If you're a very godly person, if you're a very religious person, then you do certain things, or you not do certain things. You do the rituals, not do the rituals, certain things, because God is going to put you in hell, right? That's the fear. It is never about looking at oneself, right? If a particular ritual is given in the books, you want to do it because it is given in the books. So it is not like, let me peel this layer. Why was this done? How can it help me in my day-to-day life? Ultimately, all of this, if it is not used for your self-growth, then it is pointless. Religion is pointless. You have come to live this life And if this life, if you can live happily by blindly believing in certain faith, that's one way of causing less harm in the society, sure. But it doesn't help you understand the deeper purpose of like what is going on. How can I be more brotherly, more neighborly, or more understanding of people? That kind of transcending does not happen. And if you look at Buddha's, what is that, 8 paths or whatnot, a lot of that is really, I mean, there's a lot of depth to it, but ultimately it is coming to a point where it is extinguishing that I, right? The nirvana, the getting rid of this I-ness. And then that is the self-growth towards, right? We each see God based on our experience and understanding. Now uh, um, I am Hindu, maybe you're Christian, maybe somebody else is somebody else, right? Muslim. We think that our gods have been given because we were born in a certain family. And a lot of this comes very clearly in certain chapters and verses in Gita, right? Even though Gita is a very Hindu text, he makes it very clear at different places, or at least that's my understanding, is that that's not how you should understand. It is not by your birth. So now here, when we are going to talk about vibhutis, we need to remember this, that God or good or whatever we are looking at, our experience is biased by our understanding of the world, always, right? Because we can only see what we know, basically. So it's one's own journey. Now, seeing God and religion, right? That journey, once it becomes a personal journey, and it's okay for somebody to read Christian text and kind of follow that path, or Hindu text, follow that path, Muslim text, follow that path, that's okay. But the ultimate goal of that, and which again comes through here, is basically it needs to humble you. Again, that extinguishing of the I. And but what happens most of the time is we are following certain rituals because it looks better in the society, right? So that part really does not help you grow at all. While everybody might clap for you, but that is not really helping your growth. As we reach deeper in this journey within ourselves, the divisions are going to be lost, right? And the oneness is going to start happening. Now, all of this is happening through chapter 10. And in 11, when Arjuna sees the God, right? That seeing of the God is going to be, in my opinion, a personal journey for everybody. He sees God in a particular way. A Hindu is going to see a God in a particular way. A Christian is going to see God in Jesus's form, maybe. I don't know. So all of that is going to depend on your own proclivities. So I'm going to skip this for now. So again, like, not only just the words and books and religion, but even this Vibhuti exercise that we are going to talk about, that can also become a roadblock, much like the words and thoughts, books and gurus, right? What happens is we think that when that ritual is done, that is good. When I read the Gita every day, that is good. Or when I, utter a certain chant, that is good. Or if I sit for an hour, with the lamps and all of that stuff, that's it. Right? So that kind of getting stuck can be quite dangerous, right? So we mistake these words for our, when we read a book, that's another thing, right? Forget about religion or forget about spirituality for a second. Even basic, like let's say we are trying to understand some physics concept. To understand that physics concept, thankfully, if I'm going to a university and I have a paper or an exam that I need to sit through, I will read the concept in the book, but ultimately I have to have that understanding. It's not just enough for me to just read and say, okay, I've read about it. So that deeper understanding is going to help me do better in that exam, right? So borrowed knowledge is another thing that Krishna does talk about at different places. It's just whatever you're listening from other people. So Arjuna, right before he jumps into Vibhuti, he says, "Look, despite Krishna telling him, look, I am speaking, I am the deeper voice, I am the Bhagavana," right? He says, look, I think I've heard about this stuff from, and he's facing him, he's right in front of him. He is saying, Vyasa has said this, Narada has said this. Now, these were some big stature people back then. So he is saying, I have the proof that these guys also believe what you're saying. So I think I'm going to believe in that as well. But I want you to tell me more. So he's not directly connected to the knowledge that Krishna is trying to give to him. So that borrowed knowledge can also be kind of distracting you from the real jnana, right? So when you see the glory that we are going to talk about, right, in various things, something good, something like even as simple as a rose flower. When you see the rose, immediately we have been conditioned to automatically react to a red rose. What a beautiful rose it is. Or we have become numb to that beauty, right? That is also the side effect of it. So verbalization can come from a variety of places. Verbalization can come from what you have been taught in schools or what you have heard other people say. So it is not a deeper expression, right? And this is where I think that when you look at an abstract art where nothing is clear, yet it is very awe-inspiring. You kind of like just like fixated. It's like, what the heck is this, right? Because your mind is struggling to put that in words. But then you just kind of like calm it down and you understand the beauty much better, right? So I think this is where when the Vibhuti exercise that I had recommended, this was one thing that I wanted to see how you guys felt about it. And again, God, the concept of God as it comes through through a lot of these chapters is, we think that God is going to be like revealed as a whatever the form that we are familiar with, this baby-faced person with beard, let's say Jesus is coming down or whatnot, right? But in my opinion, God is more than that, right? It's not. So the search for God or seeking God is more about knowing God, or better to say manifesting God, right? But let's just stick with knowing God, which is we see the manifestation of God in variety of forms out there in the universe. Now, one of the Swamis says that we live under such a hypnotism. In fact, I think Krishna also mentions that in earlier chapters, right? Common people are just wondering about this planet with just a haze or a daze. And we ourselves have deceived ourselves so perfectly. And this is also something that, the question of Maya comes about, right? Where, we, in Hinduism, you guys might have heard the term Maya, and I brought it up many times in the past. It is explained in variety of ways, right? So, but the whole thrust of Gita is that you are God, I am God, right? So finding that God within us becomes an important part because we are an aware being. That awareness is going to help us rise to that level of this feeling that I am God. Now, the side effect of awareness is that, you get this feature called as mind. Mind takes over. When mind takes over, you are transacting in the world with all kinds of love and hatred type of relationships. And you start drawing these limitations or limits around you. And that is most of us, right? 99% of us. And there's only one or two Buddhas and Krishnas that happen about. But that is that deception or the Maya of the awareness. So it's as if, like, fire has so many innate powers. It could light up the room, but it also has heat as its secondary effect, right? So much in the same way, awareness has these properties. This comes in so many other Upanishads as well. But if you look at it in this simple example of how we have deceived from the point of, let's say, God, religion, or whatnot, right? How we interact in the world, that itself can also be considered as a Maya. So, oh, this thing is blocking here. Okay, so glory is us watching something out in the world, or Vibhuti is something we are watching out in the world, and we feel like this is a manifestation of God. Now, to get to that feeling, there needs to be a grace that comes upon you. What that means is that we'll talk about here. So one of the Sufi sayings is that we cannot seek until it's not seeking us. It's as if you walk one step towards God and God walks one step towards you. Or another way to think about it is when your mind wants to transact in this world, you step back, meaning you step towards your consciousness, right? Now your consciousness has stepped towards you, making your action a little more cleaner than earlier action. So that's another way to interpret this, right? So the consciousness is always there. I mean, it is the reason why we interact in this world, right? It is always wanting you to do the right thing, but mind takes over and it starts thinking that you are the person who is controlling this. So a couple of things here that I'm just going to quickly bring the discussion towards, like, what is happening today, right? How the news media, social media, and everything, how it is benefiting from this kind of our behavior, where we tend to want to look at our gaze always goes towards something that is negative, some destruction, right? If somebody told us, hey, this person, he did something amazing, immediately, even if that person is not in the room, you might just say, oh, wait a second, didn't he have that other problem? Yeah, so that just negates his good thing, right? Or if you hear that this person has done something negative, then you immediately want to believe it and saying, oh yeah, we already knew he was a crook. So there is this tendency for us to do that. And part of it is because we are also acting in this world, and we know that we have committed some mistakes along the way. We all have committed some mistakes. Now we want to justify around it by seeing bad in other people, right? So it's yet another way to kind of pardon ourselves. And that is the part that, deceiving ourselves. Instead of that, why not see the good in others? Once you start seeing good in others, your bad, whatever you have done, you can actually face it and kind of rectify it, right? That's the point of this sort of like, seeing things out there which are going to make you feel like, that's the glory of God. So news, social media, and all of this they literally thrive on this particular attention, right? All those likes and, all of that stuff. It's basically being fed by our drive, wanting to go out there and seeking validation from out there, right? Glory is where I is forgotten, limited feels connected to the infinite in humility, right? So the idea is like you look at this flower, rose, for example, and no judgment, but you look at the beauty, and part of it is you appreciate like how this plant has come about, how these petals have curved, this beauty that I can see. Does the rose know that it is beautiful? Or is it because I am aware being looking at this rose and I can feel some emotions about it? What an amazing thing, right? Now, it can be such a mundane thing, it's such a common thing that we have lost the appreciation for us being such an aware person. So if you look at the 20, 40 vibhutis, that 20 to 40 verses that Krishna goes through, those vibhutis were amazing things that were probably relevant for Arjuna. So for example, in our case, it could be, let's say, Elon Musk. Some people like him, some people hate him. But, he has billions of dollars. We love money. And we say, what an amazing guy, right? He's doing such amazing things. And if that brings about some kind of an humble, now this is my understanding, my interpretation, right? So what that does is it the ultimate goal is samarpan. Samarpan, he talks about that many times, which is humbleness, bowing, curbing your eye, right? That's the main thing. Whatever helps you do that is a good thing, right? And learning, right? Becoming a student, a guru is going to come your way if you're willing to learn. A teacher is going to come your way if you're willing to learn. A teacher can come in any form. They're not going to come with certain accolades, but if you are so it's ultimately, as you are transacting through this universe or on this planet, a new kind of a secret language is going to be developed for you, like you within you yourself, and you're going to understand what is happening better out there slowly as you start appreciating things for the right reasons, right? It's as if consciousness is meeting consciousness, right? And mind is going to stop, and that state is really, I mean, dhyana or the Zen state, or in Zen and stuff like that, when they talk about this, um, um, there's no words, right? So it's just a kind of a existence where you understand the thing for what it is, and there is a certain inner silence, and the seeking of jnana is something that is happening in your own laboratory within you, right? But most of the time, we're taking this action out in the world, running around, doing our things and all that stuff, right? And that is what becomes the most important thing for us. But this Vibhuti exercise is supposed to bring about that inner silence, walking towards yourself or stopping the running in the world, right? And that is one side of the puzzle. And then grace is going to happen, right? What that means is where the infinite feels connected with the limited, right? So we are the limited thing. And um, so the path that you choose, whatever path, it doesn't really matter, or whatever vibhuti that you've chosen, be it the rose flower, be it Elon Musk, be it, I don't know, whatnot. It could be some sad event. It could be Holocaust. Again, you're not appreciating it, but you're appreciating the feeling it is evoking within you. And that feeling is coming about because you're a conscious being. And that appreciation itself is going to make you come closer to yourself, right? I mean, that is the point. Or at least you can see that there is something godly, something divine in it. And so the journey is kind of bi-directional. So there is one of the Swami kind of explains it more as a dhara, means a river flowing. And Radha used to be Krishna's soulmate. We don't know for sure, but anyway, so there's Krishna, Radha. Radha Krishna is a very common deity that people worship. So Radha is just a reverse of Dhara. Dhara is pushing us into the stream of life, and we are getting pulled into the samsara, or this wheel of life. But how do we stop that running around, right? So um, And so the journey is in looking at glory. Yeah. So again, in looking at the glory, the joy we feel is the grace, right? So when you feel that joy, and you're not like, oh yeah, it is rose, it is beautiful, and then you move away, right? So you've basically verbalized it, and you think that verbalization is appreciation and done, you move on. But staying in that moment, stopping the words, is going to give you much better sort of this feeling they call as ananda, right? Satchit ananda, or the bliss, or the joy. Um, and this has nothing to do with your eyes, nor your ear, nor your mind or brain, right? Um, so I wanted to also mention an interesting book that I came across, which is, what is his last name? Fritjof Capra has written a book, The Tao of Physics, I think. And he kind of covers this Vedanta and Hindu philosophy in the light of Western thinking, which I think is quite interesting. He puts this quote of Don Juan, right? Any path is only a path, right? Gita, Christianity, it's just a path. Has nothing to it. There's nothing wrong or good about it or bad about it, right? And there's no affront to oneself or to others, right? So in dropping it, if that is what your heart tells you, right? If you don't like Gita, that's okay. But whatever you like, be dedicated to it. Be fully committed to it. Don't worry about the judgment that you're going to get from other people or whatnot. You're going to come to the same realization at the end of the day. And Krishna covers that in one of the chapters as well. Look at every path closely and deliberately. Try it as many times as you think necessary. Then ask yourself, and yourself alone, right? So no validation needed from outside. This is not a discussion with others. This is your own inner discussion. Only one question. Does this path have a heart, right? Is it bringing the joy to you? Is the grace following your appreciation or your being there, right? That if that happens, if it does, the path is good. If it doesn't, it's just a waste of time. It's a waste of time that you have been given a limited time on this planet. And if you're not going to use it productively, and just you're going to be hither skither all over the place, trying multiple different things, reading, but you're not living it, any of the paths, is just a waste of time. You're going to come close to your last moment and you would feel still lost. uh, I think this was interesting, and this is where we look at our own tendencies. You might be an engineer, you might be a housewife, you might be whatnot. So we all appreciate different things. So you start with whatever you appreciate. That becomes your vibhuti, finding what clicks with us. Awe-inspiring. Ultimately, the result of awe is you feel less than something else. So it's an humbling experience. So we think God is out there, but ultimately we want to get away from this God is far out there in the skies. God is here next to me, around me, in everything, right? As you start with things that you appreciate, you start adding more things to it, right? And slowly you're going to get to the point where God is me, right? What that doesn't mean some egomaniacal thing, but it is more that always good comes out of me. God is manifesting through me, right? That's what it should be meaning. If God did appear in flesh, like if it was around us, like in Arjuna's case, Krishna was right there, but he had doubts. um, and most of the time it is the ego. And also part of it is like when we look at that other person, you might see he's just like another human being like us, and he might sweat and he might do all of that stuff, and he's aging. And so that commonness is like, no, that can't be divine. So that is something that will block us from seeing God in the other person, right? So this is what we want to resist. Humility unblocks sense limitations, right? A feeling of surrender, and not as a defeat, right? So it is not a defeating thing, but letting the experience happen. You open to that experience. So there are these two things that are some good, interesting things to look at, right? When we are in love with somebody, we tend to want to be alone with that person. We want to be away from the crowd, right? So this is as close as you get to, like, hey, I'm trying to understand myself. I want to, this one person is the most important person for me, right? So you've already kind of come closer to you. And here your minds and bodies are trying to meet, right? The result could be sex, love, whatnot, right? But when we are talking about this deeper connection with something, there is a meeting of consciousness, right? So here you're coming even more closer, right? So remember those three concentric circles: bodies are meeting, minds are meeting, but now your awareness is aware of the other person, right? So another thing that comes across is that when we look at things, understand that our senses have a certain spectrum. We can see only 7 colors, or some of us only see few colors, right? We are colorblind. We have a limited range of hearing. There's a limited window into this expanse. So if we are going to be biased by this limited understanding, that's also a certain Maya, certain deception that we have signed up for. But if we tell ourselves, like, whatever is coming to my eyes, I need to be open to understanding more, right? I need to dig deeper. So that becomes part of this exercise, right? When you're looking at Vibhuti, start going a bit deeper. The so-called God, we talked about religion. A lot of that is kind of man-made. Yeah, I think I'm going to skip that part. Again, God is certain experience, not a thing. And, I think this is where he kind of ends that chapter 10. Whatever beautiful and glorious creature thou seest in the world, whatever being is mighty and forceful, right? Anything that you see among men and above man and below him, right? Know to be a very splendor, light, and energy of me, and born of a potent portion, right? Portion is key. He is even more vaster than that little beauty that you see in the rose, for example, or Elon Musk or whatnot, right? And intense power of my existence, right? So it's kind of like, another analogy given to this by one of the Swamis is that you look at this universe, there is the sun at the center of our solar system. There are these planets that are going around. But when, now we have atoms. And, even though we have a physical body, we are really made up of emptiness and a bunch of electromagnetic waves basically coming together to make us feel solid. So if you look at the universe from that electron's perspective or proton's perspective, there is an infinite space there, much like the universe. So it's sort of like infinity within infinity. That is the place that, when we understand ourselves that way, and not this limited I with this body which is aging and all of that stuff, our perspective changes. You're made of infinity, I'm made of infinity, right? So there is a certain, and the fear of death and all of that stuff can also be controlled by that. So yeah, I think, yeah, this was the exercise. And seeing God in everything is, this is that person that I mentioned about God is immanent in the whole of creation, but is not identified with it, right? So I would also recommend, if you guys come with a Christian background, it might be interesting for you to read this River of Compassion. So he takes every verse and he has like a little paragraph explanation. It's not a very heavy read, but it's kind of nice. He kind of talks about Hindu perspective and also the connection to Christianity, which I thought was very nice. So one of the things that I had recommended to folks is that observe things that catch your attention. So much like what Krishna has done in chapter 10, where he talks about all these different symbols and where Arjuna should look for God. The idea was for people who have attended these series for last 9 or 10, whatever series, each of us would bring something to the table. But looks like we all are new here. Yeah, so with this understanding, I'm going to open the floor. And next time we're going to go into chapter 11. But the idea here is that Krishna is telling Arjuna about his glory. Arjuna is listening to it, right? Next chapter, chapter 11, Arjuna says, okay, I think I've heard, but I want to see, right? So seeing is a little more permanent proof, isn't it? So he says, I want to see. And that what that is going to be is what we're going to see next time. But yeah, anybody has any points to make, questions, whatnot? Or anybody who has certain thing that they looked at it and it was so awe-inspiring that it kind of wanted you to just like put you into a silence, and you saw your mind stopping. So if you want to share that, that would be awesome too. uh,
Can you share your experience with us?
my experience.
Yes.
Yes. So what happened recently was I sort of went through a my neighbor had lost his dog, her dog. And we have been kind of together with each other. And something happened where, we were friends only for a little bit of time. So this was not an observation like a rose, but it was a life incident where it allowed me to kind of separate myself from my feelings, sort of, right? And that is what this Vibhuti exercise is supposed to help you see, that, when you see something, can you separate yourself from the experience and see you appreciating that flower? And so in this case, what happened was we kind of broke up. So long story short. And then at the same time, my daughter broke up with her boyfriend as well. And we were discussing, like, what our experiences have been. And she says something really interesting, and she said, Dad, I think I've come to a point where I feel like in any relationship, we really shouldn't be too attached. I'm like, wow, that is, if that has not the summary of Vedanta, basically, right? The attachment can cause you sorrow, and um, so, yeah, I think for me, it was as if somebody deeper was speaking to me at that point. And it kind of felt like, uh, I got to see my own thoughts in that experience. Um, and yeah, so that was my recent sort of an experience. So yeah, thanks, Lisa. Yeah. So anybody else? Anything on Gita? Anybody? I know Rohit was still here. Is Rohit still here, or he left? I guess he left. Anybody else has any other perspective, without not just the Vibhuti, but just like you guys find this topic too complicated? Yeah, Fred?
in one of the verses here in chapter 10,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's pretty complicated, but also pretty meaningful, insightful. I really enjoy it. I have to read it several times to really get it.
Yes, that's the key. Yeah.
And one of the verses, chapter 10, I don't have the numbers, but I think it's around 20 or so.
Yeah, I can share my screen and then you can also see it. 1 second. Yep. So there we go. 20 is this what you mean?
Yes, in that one, that says there, I am the self which abides within all beings.
Mm.
I took that to be a Brahman.
Correct. You got it. So he basically, this is the first thing he says, right? I'm going to tell you all the vibhutis. So he says, let me start with this. He says, when you feel that awareness, that's me. That awareness that you feel, that self that you feel, which abides within all beings. And then he also says, I am the beginning, middle, and end of all the beings. Now, if you remember our discussion around the, the seer and the seen, I don't know, that was from a while ago, where we talked about our waking experience and dream experience and deep sleep experience. Do you kind of remember that, Fred? Not
Yes.
quite, or I can bring it back here. So is that, when we are awake, we are watching the world, right? And we are conscious, obviously, at that point. When we are sleeping, we are watching the dream. So we are, again, conscious, and that's why we are enjoying or fearful of the dream. And then we go into the state of deep sleep. So when we go into the state of deep sleep, but then we wake up again, right? When we wake up, we say, oh, I slept like a baby at that point. So the way, now you might think that you were unconscious during that time because you were deeply asleep. But what the Hindu Upanishads and everybody want to suggest and to have an understanding here is that when you're awake, there is the consciousness or your awareness that is helping you experience that stuff. When you're dreaming, again, the consciousness is aware, helping you aware, your mind see all those dreams. And the deep sleep is happening. Even during the deep sleep, your mind and your body and your senses have gone down, but the consciousness is still there. And that's why when you wake up, it is going to tell you like, hey, yes, you had a very deep sleep. So consciousness kind of lives about as a background throughout your life's experiences. Then they extrapolate that to even death, right? So it is the same consciousness that comes as Shashi or Fred or Lisa or Jason, right? And then that form goes away, but the consciousness still stays, right? And so that's why he says, I'm the beginning and I'm the middle and I'm also at the end, right? Of all the beings, the so-called living beings that you can think of. So that's where he starts the discussion, saying that when you think about your own conscious self, that consciousness has been with us since our childhood, and we have gotten numb to it. And this whole exercise is supposed to renew you to appreciate this awareness, appreciate the fact that, we can understand Gita. This understanding is coming to us thanks to consciousness, our awareness. We can listen to each other. We can remember each other's names, all of that stuff, right? So that is that he says that consider that as God within you. And then, I would recommend, if you're really interested in the symbology of all of these stuff, I would Google Adityas, Vishnus, any of these complicated names. There is quite a bit of depth online about these things. They have a certain meaning, and that would take its own, I don't know, 18 lectures, because there's too much symbology behind them. But yeah, that first one, thanks for bringing that up. That's really kind of the summary. So he starts here, and he kind of around the somewhere here, he says this is another. So he talks about everything that Arjuna and his time frame, and I kind of know the story of Prahlada. I know this Nagas and Varunas and all of that stuff, so I kind of understand what he's trying to say there. But in your case, it could be like I don't know, Agamemnon, or Achilles, and those people, right? Those people sort of start playing an important role in this kind of symbology. But then he says, I am Krishna among the Vrishnis. Vrishnis is the clan of Krishna, where Krishna was born. And he says Arjuna among the Pandavas, right? He says, if you want to know where God is, Krishna is the God. And if you want to know God, where God is within you, Arjuna, within your whole family, you are God. And so he kind of brings it back to observe yourself. He says, you are asking about all these vibhutis everywhere else, but you yourself are the God. And effectively, Krishna is saying that to us, right? That you yourself, don't forget about yourself. While you go and appreciate this world, ultimately, you want to sit down with yourself and then transact in the world. Yeah. Yeah, these are it kind of gets difficult and hard to digest, this whole concept of seeing God in oneself, isn't it? Or do you guys feel like you're gods now? Uh, so yeah, I mean,
So any other question or
yeah,
comment?
any other points to be made? Um,
I like to add something. Coming from monotheistic background, so then we start thinking that then God is the good, as you mentioned, and the evil at the same time, which
yes.
goes, in contrast to monotheistic traditions and cultures where God is siding with the good and the evil is separate from God.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, you're right. And that is one of the key elements that he brings out here, is that he says, I am the creator and I am the destructor too. So every bad thing that you look around, that bad is also happening attributed to me, my consciousness. There is consciousness acting in that bad element too. So it is another way to look at this is a kind of a psychological change in our mindset when we are looking at things and judging things. How do you interpret something bad that is happening in the world? Do you want to go down in depression about it and be angry and fearful about it? Or look at it positively, yet you still want to take the action. You want to take the action not out of anger. So if you look at all the different ramifications of, let's say, World War II, or what happened with Japan, with Hiroshima, Nagasaki, or even this current war, right, with Gaza and Palestine and Israel. You look at this reaction where the other side is bad. Basically, all it does is it also makes us bad in the same way, and the bad element basically wins, converting you to think in the same terms. So let's say you're fighting fascism. In the process, the actions that you take can also seem fascistic. And that's a problem. And we see that, right, across the globe. When America reacts to certain things, depending on which side of the island you are on, you might feel certain different emotions connected to how America reacted to a certain event. And understanding that God is on both the sides, because God is omnipotent, God is powerful, and God is us, right? There's no like some Superman sitting out there that is going to come to rescue us. That's not happening. We got to manifest God. And if there is a bad thing happening out there, how do we react to that? Considering all those concentric circles that we talked about earlier, are we reacting from the mind or reacting from the body? That's where all these different, hero villain stories now have a very different understanding. The hero becomes a hero because of the villain. The villain becomes an interesting, important element in that hero's life when we read that story. If that villain did not exist, there was no hero. So similarly, in our case, these things that come across to us in life as evil, think of it as an existential crisis, and it is helping somebody to rise above their human abilities, to act what they are called upon to do at that point. And hopefully it doesn't come out of hatred. Sometimes we see winning as something that what we hate getting destroyed, right? And that winning might cause us more destruction in future. So there's so many such things. And also to think that God and evil are these two different camps. There is a Satan. And somehow, don't we see that there's too many bad things happening on this world? So doesn't that make God less powerful than Satan or the evil? So the whole concept of these two different things is sort of does not make God powerful, if you will, right? Satan somehow comes across as the winner. But when we think of Satan and good as an element of God's play, or Leela, as we call it, then it becomes a little more deeper understanding of this whole notion of God as an experience, not God as some powerful human being. Jason, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to talk about the chapter 11 for the next one. It's
yeah.
There's a famous quote, the so-called Oppenheimer quote, right? So it talk about like I'm time, I'm the destroyer of all, something like this. Does that means Hindu God is not like a Christian God, like all omnibenevolence, because it's the same source of the good and evil, destroyer and the creator. It's not intentionally good and love.
Right.
Am I right?
So yes, and the thing is that the so-called, see, everything that comes to birth has to die. So we think that when we come to birth, we want to stay there forever, for infinity, right? Because we are afraid of death. Yet that is the equation of life. Life is happening with a background of death. In fact, he says here, right? Somewhere he says in one of the places, he says, I am the death.
Yeah.
God is the death, he says.
It's a Yama.
I am the life and I am the death. you know. Point is that God is everywhere, right? So the notion that something bad, destructing is happening, we think that that is not benevolent. Yes, it is not from our small limited perspective. But there's always creation and destruction, right? So we have Hindus believe in this time that is like a wheel, right? You know, it's a continuous circle, and you know, we have been existing for infinite time, not just as some people believe, which is 4,000 years and all that stuff, right? So we have been around for millions and billions of years. So
in this point of view, that means, you know, Hinduism doesn't have the Christian problem of the source of evil, right?
Oh.
Christian constantly talk about since God is omnibenevolent, right? Where is the evil coming from? That become like a perennial subject. So
correct.
with this concept, there's no source of evil.
There's no source of
evil. Okay.
There's no evil. So it starts immediately changing your mindset away from fear. So we are not fearful of death. You know, we look at things positively. We are ready for, you know, just by staying afraid of death is not going to take the death away, right?
Yeah.
So Arjuna, in his running away from the battlefield, he was afraid of death. He was afraid that he might lose. He might lose his loved ones, and he might lose himself in the process too, right? And that is going to come about in chapter 11. You know, as you guys are going to read, you know, that whole destruction part of the God that shows up. He says, "Hey, look, I can see all my brothers and my Duryodhana and grandpa and everybody going into your mouth, right?" But in that verse, one key element is missing. He said he never observes himself going into that path of death. So don't miss that when you guys read chapter 11. It's kind of interesting, and we will discuss what does that symbology mean, you know, from our day-to-day point of view. You know, it's as if we all are walking towards the mouth of death, isn't it? And that is that God's wide open mouth, the destructive point where we are running towards it. And so Krishna says that I am not doing it. He says that it's not that I am attracting them towards death, but they are walking towards death, you know? So we all are in our own way, ignorant ways is what Krishna would call it, that we are walking towards our own destruction every hour of the day. And to save ourselves from that kind of a destruction, one of the things that Buddha also says is if you can observe death in your real life, like, just, which is what samadhi is, which is what curbing your mind is, you know, stopping your mind, all of that feeling is sort of coming close to this notion of death. Deep sleep is sort of like that, but deep sleep, we are almost kind of like unconscious, right? So we are not aware that, you know, we are deep sleeping. But at least in the yoga samadhi, where, so again, a lot of this is just experimenting on yourself, understanding that when you can immediately separate yourself from the experiencer and observer, you realize that this observer is not bodiless. He doesn't have a form. He doesn't have a sex, nothing whatsoever. Doesn't have a name, but it's aware that, you know, my hands are moving, I'm talking to you and all that stuff. And that kind of brings you closer to this feeling of like your infinitude. So the fear of life and death, you understand it as, yeah, it's given, you know, it's part and parcel of this life. There's nothing wrong in it. And it doesn't become very fearful. Yeah, much like, you know, you go under the, you know, like if you go for a root canal, you go there with an understanding that it's going to be painful, right? If you go there with an understanding that it's going to be painful, and then you relax, I remember this dentist, he was such a nice, amazing person. Like he would say to me, Shashi, breathe. You gotta breathe 3 times. Breathe out, and I'm gonna give you enough shots where you're not gonna feel the pain. Tell yourself everything is gonna be okay. Everything is gonna be okay. So anyways, Fred have anything else? Yeah.
Oh, you actually already anticipated the questions that that I had, gave me an answer. That was really striking in chapter 11 when it leads off, where he finally gets Krishna to reveal himself. And Krishna leads with saying, I am the destroyer. So it's really striking. But then he immediately turns around and takes a more benign aspect to him. And I took that as kind of a personal application for each of us, that I think what by inducing Krishna to reveal himself, you're looking for an exemplar for how we should behave and who we are. And it's as if in chapter 11 it says, okay, first of all, before I tell you how you should really be or how you can potentially be, let me remind you that we're subject to time, and death is always there, and you have the potential, all that evil and stuff is right there, part of you that you have to deal with. So taking that in consideration, there are these other sides that you should develop as well. So I thought was really interesting that he should lead with that image of himself as the destroyer, then move on to the more benevolent side.
Yeah. And just basically coming to the reality, they are on the battlefield, remember, right? And Arjuna is trying to run away from it because there's going to be a carnage. And he says that the carnage is going to happen regardless of you, Arjuna, irrespective of you deciding whatever you want to do, everybody is going to die. So with that understanding, if you're called upon to be a warrior, be a warrior. But if you really have a deeper call to be a recluse and go to the mountains, go ahead. And that's up to you. And the last line of this book is going to be kind of interesting. That's where he leaves. He says, Krishna says to him, I've told you enough, and it's up to you now at this point. Chapter 18. Anyways, so that was great, I hope. And I hope people can go look at the last 10, 11 series that we have done. And, if you have access to this book, River of Compassion, see if you want to get it from library. It's a very old book. I even found an internet copy of it, which could come in handy, given that some of you might have the Christian leaning here. On Internet Archives, if you do a search for River of Compassion, you just have to kind of sign in with your Google or something, and it's it really goes chapter to chapter with different things. That's a good book. Eknath Ishwaran is a good book, and the links that we have sent, those are good. But if you just don't want to read any of the books, please at least watch all the YouTube videos next time when you come to the session, because it is going to get fun. Chapter 11 is going to be fun because it's by far the most complicated to really understand the symbols there. That's it.
Okay, so thank you, Sashi, and thank you, everyone. And then we already get the most part of the book. So next year we will finish.
Oh, yes, that's right.
So you have to think about what's next. So
yeah. So happy New Year if I don't see
yeah, Happy New Year. And then let's work on the schedule. And then next week is our last section, okay, for 2023. And we have a special subject about a special Chinese scholar. Okay, he is Western educated and become a conservative. That's in my point of view. And we will have to see CK talk about this. So
what is the topic?
The topic is Gu Hongmin, okay, the spirit of Chinese people. Okay,
Uh-huh.
that's the book he wrote. Okay, so he's not a well-known scholar, but he represents some kind of reaction during that time, early 20th century. Okay, so we'll see. I'm not very familiar with this subject, but CK, some may familiar with him. He is pretty good historical background, so he will talk about this. So
Ava is asking, when is the next meeting for chapter 11? Did she already?
So
Yeah.
you have on your mic, you can throw out. So
Yeah, like in a month, right?
in a month, yeah, I think probably in February, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you want to do it in January, that's fine.
Yeah, Anne said something here.
And next year we will start from Go, the game, the chess game, Chinese Go game. Okay, Steve, we have a special guest talking about the Go game. Okay, and then I will start the history of the Chinese philosophy. Okay, from Hong Youlan. Okay, and start from the beginning. And then Kwang will talk about the Chinese history. Okay, Zhou dynasty. Okay, so we have a lot of subjects coming, so you can have a different taste.
So the playlist link, you can put it back in the next invitation, or maybe we can update this invite, today's invite, and put the playlist there. So if people want to look at it.
Okay, I probably send I always include the playlist in the meetup page, so you always can see it.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I have a plan to reorganize the meetup page, so we will have all cereal, because right now we have many different kinds of cereal, and then we have.
Can I just for like 1 second? In the invite for today's meeting, I have put like a Facebook link where, I'm just starting this little group, which is just on Bhagavad Gita. I would like similar minds like yourself, if you're interested, join there, ask some interesting questions. Last week we had Jyoti on the call, and she asked some amazing questions as well, because she had gone through some loss of one of her family or friends or somebody. And there were a couple other people who had some interesting questions. So I put the answers there. So if you click on the link on today's invite, there is a Facebook link all the way at the bottom, I believe, somewhere there. Or if it is not there, I'll put it there. So I find that a little more easier to chat and discuss. I just couldn't find a way on this meetup page to have a continuous discussion. So yeah.
Yes, I already joined. I used to have the Slack. Okay, I used to have the Slack. Okay. But now not many people join. Before I have the Slack there, and so if you want to discuss, you can, after meeting you can discuss. But turn out a lot of people they don't know how to use Slack. Okay, they have the person who have a question or want to discuss doesn't know how to use Slack, and the person who knows Slack doesn't want to discuss, so become like that. So I probably want to remake it, okay, and reorganize the Slack. So after next week, I have a kind of 2-3 weeks break. Okay, yeah. So I probably want to work on that.
One thing I would say for people like Eva, who don't have a Facebook account, I'm not very happy with Facebook myself, but it becomes one of those.
Work for Facebook.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I work for Facebook. Sorry. But what I'm trying to say is that I have Facebook account, but one of the ways I protect myself is I don't friend anybody there. Right. So I would say don't friend anybody, but you can have the Facebook, their messenger, and then there's the chat and all of that stuff, the groups. Those, I want to say, I don't think you need an account. I could be totally wrong on that, at least for that. So Ava, if you want to try linking there, maybe we can discuss more next week if you're not able to get in. But yeah, I don't know what other best option is, unfortunately, because we all work through computer these days. We're not in a physical place. So
I think the meetup message could work. I have a lot of people have a continued discuss with me through the meetup message.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
midnight meeting. Yeah, unless you want to continuously discuss, right? That's one thing. But if you want to ask a simple question, okay. So a lot of time I have communicate with some of the participants through the meetup page. I would say average, I will receive about 2-3 message every week. Okay. So if sometimes we have a further discussion, then we just exchange email. So that's the way I do.
Well, so I mean, I have dedicated this page for Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita studies for myself and anybody who wants to join. And it's not just for meetup. That's just going to be my lifelong thing, and it will be an ongoing thing. Maybe in future, if you want, we can meet differently in a different setting to talk more about this, repeat this series or whatnot. Outside of the Asian philosophies if you want. But I'm just trying to create a community where, we can discuss this stuff. Obviously there's a lot bad going on on the planet. And I think this kind of keeps me sane, sort of, when I look at the world and feel better. Yeah. Anyways. So thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you. And then hope to see you guys next week. And then
Next
thank
year.
you, Sashi. Okay, so you probably send let's talk about the schedule next year.
Oh, yeah.
Offline.
You can suggest the time and I can.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
So you are fine about like once a month, right?
Sure. Once a month. But if you have a time slot that you think you want me to present, like in 2 weeks, that's okay too. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
And are you still in town for next couple of weeks?